Let me. Tom, did you stop the video for me?
No. There's some.
That's what the message is. It says it stopped my video. I'm unable to start the video. If I can't use the video, I can't.
Wait a second. What do you mean? I think when I start.
I think we all have that same message, Tom. It has to be something that you need to do on your end.
Let me.
Did you make me a co-host, Tom?
Your code. Yes.
Let me see if I can find out what's happening.
Oh, you know what the problem is? Because I'm sharing, you can't.
Oh, you're sharing your screen. I see.
Right. 'Cause
Okay.
I'm sharing my screen. You can't.
Hello, Professor Bishop and Dr. Georges.
Well, hello, nice to be here.
Okay, folks, I'm going to begin now. Okay, I'm going to do one thing and then another thing. Let me first check the number of participants. Okay. Hi, everybody. I see we have over 60 participants this evening. That is wonderful. I want to begin with a brief apology. As you can see, we're kind of behind a little bit. About 3 o'clock this evening, I checked the registrations and saw that over 100 people had registered for this event. That is exceptional. But my account only manages 100 people. And so I quickly upgraded my account, which didn't do anything, still wouldn't allow me to register more than 100 people. So I changed this event to a webinar, which changes the format a little bit. That means that people who are, yes, I did start the event. And I don't see, I'm trying to monitor this on my computer, and I think people should be with me. My other computer just went out. So I'm trying to make sure that I was using my desktop as a monitor. Things are a little bit different in the webinar. I don't think we have normally I have a waiting room. I don't think we have an active waiting room. That's interesting. And my desktop is freezing up because it's a 90-year-old desktop. I apologize. I do want to.
Somebody has their hand raised in this. Did you let people in?
Yes, people are in. I think Pernille, raised her hand. I'm going to allow you to talk. Rosalind Hanson raised her hand. Ms. Hanson, can you hear us? Can you see? You should be looking up.
Yes, I can hear you and I can see you.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you. So let's go on with our presentation. Welcome to the first Words Across the Water of the fall 22. As I just explained, we had some last minute technical challenges. Thanks to you. Thanks, that is, to our participants showing up, registering in great numbers. That is excellent. That's what we want. But of course, that forced me to play with the format a little bit. I want to begin with some thank yous. First of all, this is funded by South Carolina Humanities. This is the fourth semester in a row that South Carolina Humanities has funded a Words Across the Water event. So I want to thank them for their generous support. I want to thank my employer, South Carolina State University, for making all this possible. And let me, okay, we can stop sharing for a second. There we go. Stop sharing. Yep. And now I'm going to start sharing. There we go. So I want to thank the Dean of College of Humanities and Social Sciences. I want to thank my chair, Dr. Hawes, Chair of Department of English and Communications. Similarly, I want to thank the chairs of Department of Social Science and Visual and Performing Arts, Dr. Jua and Dr. Fulani. I was doing okay. Just send. There we go. And I want to thank Ms. Hanson, who you saw me just ask for help, the Department of English and Communications. This would not be possible without her. I tell you, she is providing more than technical support. She's providing support. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this program. Allison McCletchie actually wrote the first grant that began the Words Across the Water program. Allison is an assistant professor of sociology in the Department of Social Sciences. And this grew out of a grant that she, I, and Dr. Martin put together. The previous year, in celebration of 250 years of African-American poetry, and Allison had the idea of kind of institutionalizing that program that we had done for one semester as a one-off. Co-writing that grant with her was Dr. Frank Martin. Frank Martin in the Department of Visual and Performing Arts. I have worked with Frank for over 30 years. Oh my gosh, I feel old. And Frank is a member of the International Society of Art Critics. He has an extensive career, but he's here tonight as your moderator. Before I go, I want to announce something that I'll be dropping in the chat before the evening is off. The next event in the series is October 6th, and the poets that evening will be Cindy Marshall and Jillian Hainsworth. I guess I should have introduced myself. I'm Dr. Thomas Cassidy. I am the PI on this, and I am your host this evening. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Frank Martin.
Well, let me see if I can come on video. I'm still getting that message. No, I'm unable to start my video. Let me see if I can share my screen though, because that has the PowerPoint.
Let me,
Yeah, you've disabled participant screen share.
okay, because I had you as a panelist, you should be able to host now.
Let's see what happens. Oh, okay, something's happening. Yeah, you can see me. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And I'm going to go directly to the second PowerPoint here. Let me share the screen and open. As Dr. Cassidy has pointed out, this is Words Across the Water, a conversation tonight on challenged and forbidden words in particular is our theme. And our guests are Professor Jacqueline Bishop, MFA. And we'll talk about Professor Bishop's credentials because I think she has an MA, an MFA, and another MFA, and a BA in psychology. She's extremely overqualified. And Dr. Richard Georges, who has a degree, a PhD in critical degrees in critical and creative writing, which I thought was a very interesting degree from Sussex, the University of Sussex in England. So we have a very international community here this evening. And of course, it's being presented, as Tom just pointed out, Dr. Cassidy said, the Department of English and Communications and the Department of Social Sciences and our Department of Visual and Performing Arts. And I'm your moderator, Frank Martin. So South Carolina Humanities is our sponsor and has been for these several seasons of this program. And we've had wonderful conversations. Dr. Allison McCletchie has been instrumental in helping us find some extraordinary artists, including David Rudder, and a number of brilliant poets. And our other sponsors, of course, as Dr. Cassidy pointed out, the English and Communications, the School of Education, Humanities, and Social Sciences, and the Department of Social Sciences. Now, originally this program was conceptualized as part of an outgrowth of the collections in the IP Steinbeck Museum, where I served as director for some years. And the museum is a facility on campus that houses an extensive collection of African and African-American art. This is our main gallery space. And particularly interesting was this exhibition we did on Epiphanies, and I thought of Dr. George's Epiphania, and I thought, well, we're going to have a lot of insights and surprises, maybe as a result of our interactions tonight. The museum collects African artifacts. These are Iribeji from the Yoruba ethnic group in Nigeria, as well as an extensive collection of historical photographs. And this is from our Harlem on My Mind collection, which was originally shown at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, where I started out my career in art history. And included in that collection are beautiful images of poets like this one of Langston Hughes. There's also an image of Claude McKay in that collection. I was just going to point out for Professor Bishop, and we'll talk a little bit more about her interest in Claude McKay and her Fulbright study in Morocco. So well, Claude McKay, of course, being a Jamaican who immigrated to New York. And quickly, our disclaimer. So the ideas expressed in the program are not the opinions of the administration or officials of South Carolina State University or any of the associated institutions, but are the carefully considered opinions and ideas of our individual expert guests who are distinguished in their respective fields of endeavor, and our panelists are speaking here as private citizens and not necessarily as institutional representatives. And even I am not representing an institution, but I'd like to introduce, tonight we'll be reading the Jamaican American writer, Professor Jacqueline Bishop, founder of Calabash, a journal of Caribbean arts and letters, a multilingual journal, I might add. And I'm going to take myself off camera and read some of Professor Bishop's credentials. So Professor Jacqueline Bishop is both a writer and a visual artist. She's the author of poetry collections, Fauna and Snapshots from Istanbul, and the author of the nonfiction works, Writers Who Paint, Painters Who Write, Three Jamaican Artists, and this includes herself in that discussion. She's also the author of My Mother Who Is Me, Life Stories from Jamaican Women in New York. I think concentrated in New York City, and the novel The River's Song. Professor Bishop is a master teacher in New York University's Liberal Studies program and is the founder of Calabash, as I mentioned before, which she established in 1999. Professor Bishop holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from Lehman College. Let's see if I go forward here. She has the Master of Arts degree in Fine Arts from New York University in New York City, the Master of Fine Arts degree from New York University in Creative Writing, and the Master of Fine Arts degree in Fine Art from the Maryland Institute College of Art, where I hope you knew my friend Leslie King Hammond. Yes, okay, we will talk about that too. Among her many awards and prizes and recognitions, Professor Bishop is the recipient of the 2020 Dora Maar Brown Foundation Fellowship in France. Dora Maar was an extraordinary photographer and a surrealist, and maybe she'll be brought up in our discussion as well. She was the 2008-2009 Fulbright Fellow in Morocco, and in 2009-2000, she was the UNESCO, 2009 through 2010, she was the UNESCO Fulbright Fellow in Paris. So she is the recipient of the various rewards, including the One Caribbean Media Bocas Award, the OCM Bocas Award for her book, The Gymnasts and Other Positions, and the Canute A. Broadhurst Prize for short story writing, as well as the Arthur Schomburg Award for Excellence in the Humanities from New York University. I just wanted to go through and show you, I looked at Professor Bishop's books. So this, The River's Song, Fauna, My Mother Who Is Me, Writers Who Paint and Painters Who Write, Snapshots from Istanbul, and the book for which she won the prize, The Gymnast. And this image on the cover, I think, is one of Professor Bishop's photographs. Yes, so we'll see some more of her work. So Professor Bishop's recent visual arts creations include installations of ceramic works consisting of brightly colored bone china plates that are used symbolically in Caribbean homes. The transfer images in her place, and I'll show them later, are placed upon the ceramic wares and explore the often hidden legacy of violence which sustained the systems of slavery and colonialism in the Atlantic world. And we will probably discuss more of the impact of that when we come to her work. Now this is an image, of course, of Dr. Richard Georges. Dr. Richard Georges is a writer, an editor, a motivational speaker, and an educational administrator who lives and works in the British Virgin Islands. He's the author of 3 collections of poetry, Make Us All Islands of 2017, Giant of 2018, and Epiphanea of 2019. And with that last work, Dr. George, as Dr. Bishop has also done, is a winner of the One Caribbean Media, the OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature. His award was for 2020. And he is the current poet laureate of the Virgin Islands. And he serves as president of Hamilton Lavity Stout Community College on the Isle of Tortola in the British Virgin Islands. And he's done all of this at just barely the tender age of 40. So I'm extraordinarily impressed with his work. He received his BA degree here in the States from Texas Christian University, his MA from Aberystwyth University in Wales in the United Kingdom, and a PhD in critical and creative writing from Sussex University. So this is the cover of Epiphanea, his third text, which he will be reading from tonight. And these are the covers of his other works, Make Us All Islands and Giant. And I think the way the program will proceed is we will have Professor Bishop read first, a selection of works. And I'm just going to briefly show you some of her visual art, and then we'll continue. She will cue us as to when to show these other works. This is a beautiful quilt, very evocative of the oceans around the island of Jamaica. This wonderful image, this photograph, clouds. I never thought of clouds as bodies of water, but of course they are. And so this gave me an epiphany just seeing some of her work. This is the statement with raindrops. Looks like they were on a window here. The bone china plates are part of the Market Woman story, and also History Comes to Dinner, which we'll see. This is the installation that is at the, remind me of the gallery, Professor Bishop. Oh, you have to unmute, sorry.
Farron Contemporary.
Farron Contemporary, which primarily shows China, is that right? In
Yes.
Massachusetts, yes. So these are innovative works of China. And your installation is there. And I was just going to let people see some of the details. And we'll go through this, we'll explore this more extensively after we've heard your reading with this series of plates that we will discuss. And I will take this back. So I think these are inspirations by the poet and engraver and painter William Blake, which are part of the inspiration. So you're a writer and an artist, and this inspiration for your work stems from a writer and artist and poet. And I thought that was fascinating. So I think we can simply default to, and we can come back and talk about more of your work later on. I was especially intrigued with the Rivers of Babylon pieces as well. So, and this is the photograph that was the image that, this beautiful poetic image that was the cover for Gymnasts and Other Positions. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we will also come back with Dr. George's and look at a series of images he also sent for us to consider when he reads from his work Epiphania. So I'm going to stop sharing and default to Professor Bishop. I can hardly wait to hear your commentary.
Thank you so much for having me. It is wonderful to be here. I've seen Words Across the Waters for many years. I've been a great fan. And it's wonderful to be invited to be here. I especially am glad to be sharing this event tonight with Richard Georges, who I've had the wonderful pleasure to interview. For several years, I did these, I've done these really long, in-depth interviews, and he was one of my subjects. Took it seriously, and I appreciated that. So it's great to be here with you, Richard. I noted earlier that he was asking to be a co-host so we could see his image. Just to put that out there. I'm going to be reading not from the two collections of poems, but from a new body of work that I've been working on for some while now. So these are all new poems, so about 10 of them or so. And I'll talk a little bit as I go through the poems. So the first poem is called History at the Dinner Table. And this poem, and perhaps it was this poem that gave rise to a body of work that was shown at the Ceramics Biennial, or it was the other way. But in it, I seek to bring forward, as I always seem to be doing, the untold stories of so many women in the Caribbean, whose voices and stories are not heard, or who are talked over by more important male voices, or just more important voices in general. So this is History at the Dinner Table. She would sit there with us at the dinner table, not a word to say. Some days history would look specifically at me, I being then a little girl and the youngest member in the family. I had 3 brothers, much older, had to shout for anyone to pay any attention to me. Now I wonder how all those years we abided her, the silent woman sitting with us at the dinner table, the one who listened to all the talk going on around her, the self-important things the men in our family had to say. Now I wonder why we tolerated her, the times history got up, wandered the house, touching this thing and touching that thing, the crochet, the patchwork, the long-tailed hummingbird embroidery, running work-worn dark fingers over books she could not read, all the while looking back intently at me. So that's the first poem. The women in my family have been a very strong influence in my life. I was fortunate, so fortunate, to be an adult when my great-grandmother died. And my grandmother died not but a few years ago, and I had lived for most of my childhood with my grandmother and of course my mother. And so the women in my family show up in my work a lot, and ancestry is an important part of the work that I do. So this is a poem with all the women in my family in one way or another, but it's also a poem about saying goodbye, in a sense, to the island of Jamaica, and it's called Biogeography. There was the rugged shape of an island, the constant sound of running water. A slim brown man somewhere strums a guitar and sings as if to himself, "Baby, don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be all right." Evenings huddled close to a grandmother, pale, heavily veined hands of a great-grandfather. Summers in a mythical place called Nonsuch, warm, wet embrace of mountains, ink blue, gentian violet, forest green. And my mother, always my mother, her back turned to me, a heavy gray suitcase in her hand, hums to herself as she walks off into another life. Little darling, don't shed no tears, no woman, no cry. And that poem, I was asked to write it by the Grand Dame of Jamaican poetry, Lorna Goodison, when they were having this huge seminar that was held at the Americas Center in New York City on the life and work of Bob Marley. And so some of Bob Marley's lyrics, "Baby, don't worry about a thing, because every little thing is going to be all right," and "Little darling, don't shed no tears, no woman, no cry," those are Bob Marley's lyrics. But within this poem as well is Nonsuch, which is it's a tiny district of 250 people high up in the purple blue mountains of Jamaica, deeply rural. I mean, you have to go into valleys and streams and whatnot to get there. But that's where my family hails from. It was named, of course, after the famous Nonsuch palaces in the UK. And like the women and men in my family, Nonsuch is someplace that comes back over and over again in the work that I do. Now, one of the things that is happening in this new body of work, but it has happened in the past as well, is that poems have started to call forth other poems, and poems are speaking to each other. And so in this new body of work, I didn't even see that this was going, but there's a fantastic poet who I had the wonderful good luck of meeting and having a relationship with as I continue to do a PhD in art history at the University of Leeds. I'm sure Dr. Martin is like, a PhD now, Jacqueline? Yes, a PhD now. But the poet is Grace Nichols, and she would read my works and she would talk to me about it. And Grace Nichols is an amazing poet from Guyana. And she started to pick up on this, on what we would call a river muma in Jamaica, which is, of course, a mermaid in American parlance. And she's like, I think you should do more about her, with her, the river muma. I haven't seen much about her. Of course, Monique Ruffy of Trinidad has written a wonderful book that has since then, which has gone on to get all sorts of wonderful awards about this figure. But I was doing this at this time before Monique's book came out. And I hadn't even thought about her until Grace, pulled her up. So interestingly enough, a river muma / mermaid was always the figure I would conjure up in my head whenever I think of the muse, of who my personal muse was. So this poem is called The Muse Speaks of Her Disrespect, and it's written in Jamaican talk. I is a girl who always give my man whole heap of attention. I is a girl who makes sure my man well taken care of. In week's clothes pressed and ready for him every Sunday evening. Me always patching and sewing and darning. I listen to all my man's dreams, all him nightly stirrings. And if it's good times my man want, tell the truth, dear reader. You know of another girl who can dance and move her wire waist, make up DJ song, and sing out her heart like me? Isn't that why that boy did like me, alone on the seaside, rocking to the music, singing to myself? I don't know why I even let that boy sweet talk me in the first place. Why me turn the black of me eye upon the boy from the islands, short and dark, with hair like mine, in thick, heavy ropes tumbling down him back. Why would I even bother with that idiot Odysseus? For when you got a man like that to look after, I want you to see him in his heyday, the man I fall for before him diss me. I want you to see him, this man, carrying home a string of pretty colored parrotfish I give him from the ocean for dinner. How him steam the fish down, nice, with scallion, thyme, and tomato. And we eat it with boiled yellow yam, dumplings, and okra. Them days, him used to cook for me. This was before the boy get bright and feisty. Move other woman into a house high up in the dark blue mountains with sharing. Him start calling this other woman wife. And yes, dear reader, before you knew it, there was a whole bag of jing bang picnic. So I do like I do all the others. I call back my songs into myself. Leave him without a word. Yes, reader, I did leave him speechless. I leave him, in fact, walking around and around in circles, pencils in hand, trying to find something to say to me, searching for the best way to come back home from me. So this is, of course, also a play on the whole Odysseus and Penelope. This is another River Muma poem called Sweetie Come Brush Me. I began to fall in love with this character and she really began speaking to me. This is what me, River Muma, did get for refusing, like every young gal in Nonsuch River, to listen to my mother. Furthermore, my mother did warn me about a particular school of fish always gathering under the bridge, running boat and playing dominoes and smoking marijuana. Honestly, is the better them fish boy did look to me. When one of them fish boys started to psst me and tell me how nice my tail was when we're swimming home from school, my long green locks tumbling about all about me in the water, I pretended not to care, but I did start to listen. Nothing so sweet like Jamaican man mouth when them looking for somebody. Sweeter than all the types of mangoes that grow in this one country. Sweeter even than my favorite mango. Sweetie, come brush me. I don't even know how that boy Deaton find out Sweetie my favorite mango, or where that boy used to get all those Sweetie mangoes even outside of mango season. All I know was that day in, day out, there he would be with his brown paper bag full of orange and red and yellow mangoes. That would become his little name for me, Sweetie, come brush me. Before I knew what was happening, my mother would just be shaking her head in disbelief. And it seems I was always big with Pitney. Tell the truth. Okay. And it seems I was always big with Pitney. So that's, she's a wonderful character, this River Muma. Had all these fantastic stories to share with me and to tell me. I oftentimes feel like these characters are real people out in the world and they choose me to tell their stories. This next set of poems that I'm going to read came about because it was, I think, the 50th anniversary of the film The Harder They Come in Jamaica. It's a classic now of Caribbean cinema. And they were having an exhibition and they asked several artists and writers to respond to the film. And what I did was I watched the film several times and started picking out the women in the film and telling their stories. So this is of a high class woman who the main character comes begging on the veranda. And this is what she has to say. Tell the truth. What would you do? Sitting, reading in the closed, coiled world that is your house and garden, when suddenly out of nowhere, standing before you is the exclamation point of a beggar. How did he get in here? No, you don't have any money to give him. No work either. Somebody already washes the car. You already have a gardener. He needs to become 2 quick dashes and move along. Tell the truth, dear reader, prized orchid of a woman that you are, fully arrayed in such rich burnt orange colors. Wouldn't you rise in anger too, once the lanky, bedraggled stranger has moved on, wanting to know of the 2 maids scurrying about inside, who left the gate open, right? And now I'm moving into a section on market women. I think the market woman is the face of the Caribbean, as disrespected as she is sometimes. And she, of course, shows up in the film because whenever it is the Caribbean, there is the market woman. This ample woman, the one with a multicolored Madras tie head, like a fiery red crown on her head, has been standing here in this market and selling her sweet green sweet sops all day long. Earlier, she went from yard to yard, from tree to tree, from one person to another, seeking the fruits, gathering them into a woven, perfumed basket, carefully laden with soft, hand-crushed newspaper. Watch as those who buy the sweet sops eagerly break them open. This woman, arms akimbo, laden with silver bangles, is standing in the same place her mother stood, the same place her mother's mother stood, a long line of women going forwards and backwards, all of them wanting more, wanting better. They are the women who are always thinking of the future. Every Sunday, she gathers and arranges red gingers as a bouquet at the pulpit for the pastor. Yet every day, some new problem or bother. She knows the skeletal young man who hides and reaches into her stall is hungry. She cannot feed them all. She pulls her sharp silver knife, lays the shimmering blade as a caution across his scrawny, thieving hand. And so when I was in the UK, Brixton was just my favorite place ever. Brixton Market, love it, love it, love it. And this poem was inspired by being in Brixton Market. It's called A Fruit Seller in Brixton Market Explains. I think I've done most of my poems. I probably have 4 or 5 left. A mango is a delicate thing. No matter you see her there, hard and green, she is a delicate thing. Even when she decides to change face on you, put on a flaming red or yellow dress, you think she burning up with rage from some thoughtless thing that someone said or did, she is still a delicate thing. When you're reaching over her to pick up what your eyes keep saying you haven't seen in years, you only see June Plum back home on the island, don't lean too hard against her. Take time with that bright blue plastic bag filled with salt mackerel, half a breadfruit, hard dough bread, and guava jam. You're trying with all your might to balance. For mango, she's a delicate thing. Careful with some of the things you're saying under your breath. Our mango is a nuisance now. Can be found year-round in near any supermarket. No more dedicated mango season. Mango come in like ripe banana these days. Quick o'clock, she turns sour. Sprout black spots from hurt feelings, my gal here mango. Because despite her hard, dark green exterior, believe me when I say mango, she is a delicate thing. And these last set of poems is about wandering, leaving a place, which is of course Jamaica, the Caribbean, going out into the world, and being, I guess, nostalgic for the Caribbean, and also dealing with the inevitable losses that come with life, some of which I thought would never happen. I never thought I would actually lose my grandmother, but I did. But in some ways, my art is to continue this conversation with them. And I'm also interested in how the Caribbean is constructed, both within and outside the region. And consequently, Darwin and his trips are very interesting to me. So this poem is called New World Finches. Everything happens little by little. Everything is linked by one and the same example. This is what Darwin believed. Take, for example, these New World finches that Darwin did not even bothering labeling correctly. These New World finches, all 10 or 12 species, originating from one common South American ancestor. Take, for example, their migratory flights from the mainland, how they sing even while they are flying, how they travel in small, loose groups. These birds, so peculiar to the archipelago. Take, for example, how individual groups would populate individual islands, their various adaptations, the shape of their beaks, how they build the bright cup-shaped nests that will hold the bright blue eggs of their young. Take, for example, how these small dark birds with their sad and haunting song will, little by little, become the brightly lit link in Darwin's explosive new theory of evolution. Okay. And saying goodbye. Just hurry along because we don't have that much time. So these last 2 poems are dedicated to my grandmother. The Letting Go. I want to bring flowers. No, not the showy hibiscuses, anthuriums, nor heliconias that you never wanted, that you never planted in your yard. Rather, I want to take you the simple Jamaican wildflowers, the Spanish needle and the others with their ochre and indigo centers, the ones that nobody knows their names. I want to push past the place where no fence will ever mark its boundaries, that strange, mysterious crossing over of one form into another. Why have they chosen to bury you so far at the back of the cemetery? Why didn't they listen when you said you didn't want to be buried next to that man, your husband, but instead beside your father, under the stripping arms of the guava tree, on the other side from your mother, grasping from a narrow bed in Anato Bay Hospital, so many miles away from Nonsuch, so many miles away from home, a proud woman. I imagine you pleading. I imagine you begging. I imagine you then giving up in exasperation. You wanted them to put you next to the one person you felt who always listened to you, the one person you felt who always heard you, the one man you felt who truly saw you. And this is the last poem I'm going to read tonight. And it's called There Was a River in You. And it kind of encapsulates the wandering spirit that is so much of the poetry that I'm writing these days. There was a river in you, small and dark, that kept on dividing. And like rivers do, it was always changing, always running, always taking you from one place to another. More foe than friend, that river inside you would become an ocean, taking you into the arms of all the wrong kinds of people. The river had a woman living in it. In Jamaica, we call she a river mama. And that woman, she sit on a stone inside you, combing that natty and tangled green hair of hers. And sad to say it, but from day one, that woman, she had her eyes on you. That woman, she would not stop pulling and pulling at you. And she would not stop calling and calling out to you, that blasted river mama. So much so that before you knew it, one story would lead to another. One migration would give way to another. And you, out and about in the world, would endlessly be looking for some place to settle, all because of a gal on a rock singing her sweet river song to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the wonderful work. I think we already have questions. But I think it may be because we're a little bit late starting, that perhaps we should hear Dr. George's first and come back to your questions, and then also to talk about some of your art, because the artworks amplify all the beautiful images that you've just shared with us. And I'd like to hear a little bit more conversation about that. And we have two questions, one from Nancy Miller, who was a former guest on our program, and one from one of our students, Jada Turley. But we're going to listen to Dr. George's first, and then we'll return. So welcome, Dr. Richard Georges, and we'll let you take over the program.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Very happy to be here, and I have to thank. In some ways, I think Nancy has some responsibility for today, so I'd like to thank her as well for connecting us. Sorry for it's a bit dark here, so sorry for the quality of the video, but. As Professor Martin said earlier, I'm going to read from Epiphania, and I might read one or two more, newer poems at least. The first poem is called Dead Reckoning.
Before you begin, Dr. Georges, did you want those images shown while you were reading? Or would you just look at them later?
Yeah, we can look at them later.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption.
That's fine. They say birds always find their way back home, but home is a nowhere, a memory, a never was. Do wings remember spaces in the air the way we might a place, a field of rice? How do you fly back to that? Away from a tomb of fears, this place yearning for you. Some years ago, I laid bright flowers on my grandmother's grave. Years before, I see my grandfather's ashes taken by the furrowing wind in the Bocas Islands. I am not myself, nor have I ever been, something apprehending the sun and other bright celestial objects, thinking this is a tapestry in orbit around me. I am completely convinced that we are the last creatures to discover how to be in the world. My beard grows wild. My children brush past me in the darkness. Their chattering voices fill my ears and then my chest, and I cannot hold it in. I am always coming home. Genealogies. Do not tell me a thing does not do what it does, that these chains now plated in gold are no longer chains, or that from above the clouds no longer look like drowned bodies washed ashore in the rolling surf. I must go to my mother to learn the real names of the gorgeous objects in this greened world, of the beauties that can drive the body to exhale its life in one purpling sigh, the body that is a precarious house, assembled in this world, but out of time. But I can no longer trust my mother's histories. They are not the taut suspensions my adolescent mind thought them to be. The blue-black body breaks at its closures, twisting in a dancing double helix, dripping blood and amazement. We will be home soon, bowls filled with brown oxtail and broad beans. At the food stand, an umber dog floats through the crowd like a leaf. Rituals. Come, daughter, we must go now to the hill where our ancestors strode amongst the tall grass and worked and worked and worked until the sun still sets its burning light. It will still open eyes tomorrow. It will still pass. Come, Father, we must go down the hill where your blessed ancestors are still buried in this earth, where each stone is cast and worked and worked and worked until this earth can stop spinning, or my eyes fill with salt, or as long as this day can last. Come, Mother, we must go down the hill where the water is, beyond the distant sail, to hear these voices, the ancestors' final gasp, who worked and worked and worked until the sun sank like a hurled stone, and still we are here. We are still here, holding fast. Come, children, we must go now to the hill and work and work and work until. Now, those are sort of the preamble poems or the prologue poems of this collection before we move into the experience of the storm, Hurricane Irma in 2017, and later poems sort of come out of the storm, if you will. Pathfinder. Or you can walk down Main Street, discovering the graffitied histories of this place, the leaning brick facades hollowed like tombs. Beneath every inch of this ground is blood, and we know that there's no other way to navigate a return to yourself. You can twist your limbs the way trees do, fingers gripping the firmament, toes deep in the earth, always and always searching the deep amazement this world makes of us. And I fear that all you will discover are other bodies in the same mad dance. The roads here were worn by horses and mules, generations of hooves with the good sense to meander around trees and ravines, since sometimes the swiftest way to a place is not straight to it, not geometric. You will find your way. Everywhere is song. Crown shyness. It is a cruel truth that much greatness comes from backs breaking into a field of fireflies and trees that do not touch each other for fear of shadows falling on their writhing roots. My children have played among such roots full of serpentine twisting, perfectly placed for a toddler's ankle or for something dead to grip on the way up from a grave. I roamed this rugged land as a boy, the hair on my head knotting like Lord Shiva's, my limbs growing longer, clambering up the majesty of a giant guava with the other children. At the top, we could see the surrounding villages amidst the cane, the 3 rolling ranges in dusty haze, the ocean, always the ocean, and the spreading coast of Venezuela, a grayed line on the horizon. I remember the splitting bark, multicolored and peeling, until the summit where it was a deep burning red, and we felt like little rulers, our domain as wide as the expanse before us. And here we go into the storm poems. The storm is here and a new world is awakening. Survivor stories begin to meld together. The hollow wail of galvanized tearing away from the rafters. The house opening like the mouth of a cavern. The sky, the sea, the hungry storm, all of it pouring in. They say he held the door still long after the storm had taken him skyward, like hope. And so the cataclysm comes, and all the warnings will not stop the sky devouring us. Here, every tree has been made a monument, every soul a witness that the next world is not forever a more joyful one than this. We are all a little less now. We are only ever so far from ruin. I dream on still nights, a flying man opening a door in the sky. The year has become more beautiful. There is no power in the walls. The noisy nights rattle on. So I fill my cup with as much ice as it can carry and flood it with as much drink as it will hold. Green vines cover everything that was ruined. The rabble rousers light fires on foundations. They drink, they smoke, they laugh loudly. There is more here than joy. Every morning I walk past a fallen tree, its broken boughs wet and flowering purple. This is a different kind of broken now. I've begun to learn that devastated does not mean dead, that ruin can be resplendent, that what has been emptied can be filled. This year has become more beautiful for the stars. I've heard folk measure pain by hurricane. You can still look through some windows and see only sky. Still see gaping homes like cupped hands. The day is full of heat. The screaming behemoths clear the rubble. Your morning walk is barricaded by afternoon. The map shifts. I know there are no such things as endings or beginnings, no cycles to measure, no useful predictions. The prophets are all mealy-mouthed and impotent. There's only this ball, madly spiraling through space, and that is the most reassuring thing. From the windows in our bedroom, I used to watch our neighbors, their busy lives, the tempests. Tonight, our view is clear out to the channel, the moon making the waves sparkle silver. And the last one from Epiphany I'll read before I read some of the more recent ones. It's called A Mixtape for Tortola. And it's actually an acrostic poem in response to a prompt by Visual Verse, which is a website that curates poems written by images that I think 5 poets at the time respond to. A Mixtape for Tortola. On a green island, the cassette frames 2 cyclones, time spinning away. The black cassette spins, and the room fills with static, the storm's ruthless roar, bodiless voices, the gutted, gaping houses, the still bleeding wounds. A helicopter, its blades frozen in saltire, a suspended god. We are listening, the cyclones spin, but we hear nothing but silence. Thanks. And I'll just read perhaps just this one poem. This one is called Duplex 1 after Jericho Brown. We must begin again, the repeating chorus, an echo calling, an ending. The chorus sings, the note echoes, ending. The grave is still a bleeding wound, a womb. The grave, the still bleeding wound, and the womb of us all. This earth that would bring us back, and all of this to earth would bring us back to itself, a more wanting creation. We ourselves are here, wanting creation, to make something new, or to make something at all. We make new things that mean nothing at all. There is nothing that cures empty. There is nothing at all that fills empty. You must begin again, again, again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this incredible imagery. Both of you as writers are creating these extraordinary transitions of visual experience into verbal description. And I'm haunted by the idea of the earth as a grave, and especially in the face of the devastation of a storm. And I know that Tortola was actually hit by Hurricane Irma directly. So I imagine you probably saw a great deal of devastation there, which we will, in the discussion, we'll go and look at the images. Now, I do have these 2 questions, and I think, because I had questions about certain things I wanted to ask Professor Bishop and yourself, but I think I'll start with the one that poet Nancy Miller put into the chat, and she was asking Professor Bishop, she says, Jacqueline, does speaking in the Jamaican dialect access certain types of poems for you? And I know that you traveled so extensively, and you've actually spent more time away from Jamaica than living there. So speaking in Jamaican dialect, does that bring home certain kinds of things that otherwise can't be expressed?
I want to start off by thanking Nancy for whatever role she might have played in making me be here today. She is a fantastic poet, and I also had the wonderful opportunity to interview her as well. This is a fantastic question. And one of the things that I am very interested in, and becoming more so, and you will see this in it's very clear in the images, is botany and African people's relationship to gardening, to flowers, to land, to the landscape, right? And one of the things that Jamaicans, and I suspect others in the diaspora, did as well, was use the names of plants to keep a connection to Africa. and to recreate an African imaginary, right? And that plays into some of what I'm doing with the plates and as well. So and it's rapidly vanishing as we Latinize all these names and give them European names and whatnot. And that African imaginary is vanishing. So it is important, yes, to use that language, because it encodes so many things, including the very botanical plants and animal names that we have in the Caribbean, and how the folks that came from Africa either brought them and insisted upon the names that they knew them by, or used those names to keep their connection to sub-Saharan Africa. So yes, it gives access to things that ordinarily I could not access otherwise.
Well, in America, well, in South Carolina, at least, I know I'm thinking of goobers, which are peas, or of certain kinds of other terms like I guess okra is actually an African word. So it's something that's retained. And so, yes, I see what you're saying about this retention of Africaneity through language, through connection, that is a kind of centering of culture. I'm going to go ahead with the second question to you, and then I'll have a question for Dr. Georges. But it's Jada Turley's question. And she says, hello, my name is Jada Turley, freshman psychology major from South Carolina State. She's a psychology major, as you were. And she says, I have one question I'd like to ask. What was an early experience where you learned that language had power? And I think I could ask that question of the two of you. So I'll ask Dr. Georges to respond to that as well.
So I began writing poetry very early on, from a very young age. And the first time I got my poems published, I must have been like 10, and they came out in a church publication on the island. And I took the poems and I sent them off because I saw in a magazine that they wanted song lyrics. And they wrote back and said they wanted these poems as lyrics. And I never followed up with it, but that was the most astonishing thing to a 10-year-old girl on the island of Jamaica, that what she had written could go that far, could have that impact, both at the church where everybody stopped me and I was, they'd made a whole insert of it. Mm-hmm. And that some company who probably thought I was a grown-up wanted to use them as song lyrics. And I started to learn the power of words very early on.
So words in so many ways define us and define our experiences, because first of all, we have what we're told by those around us, and we have our inner narrative that's telling us stories about ourselves. So yes, words do seem to be extraordinarily important for all of us and how we construct identity. Dr. Georges, what was it that perhaps had an impact on you when you discovered the power of language?
Well, I think it'll go back to my childhood in Trinidad, and my parents, my mom actually just dropped off my eldest while we were on. Essentially, what used to take place, my father worked for, at the time, the largest agricultural entity at the time, and my mom worked in steel imports. So what happens, I would finish school, and my elder siblings would have been doing exciting things like O-level preps and extra classes and these kinds of things. So those are, island-wide exams, or Commonwealth-wide exams, really. And so I was in primary school. I must have been, I would say probably between the ages of 8 and 10. I would, maybe even younger actually. And my mother's father, my maternal grandfather, lived with us. He had an apartment downstairs of the house in the agricultural company's compound. Mm-hmm. And I would get dropped home at 3 o'clock or whatever, and everybody else would get home by 6. And my grandfather used to give me all sorts of books to read that, we could care less if they were appropriate for children. So all sorts of weird stuff, lots of war literature, lots of poetry, fiction, nonfiction. He loved his westerns and he loved his military literature. So I got exposed to Kipling and Owen, those are the poetry and lots of stuff. And so I found myself writing things that maybe most 9 and 10-year-olds didn't write about. Because I had been exposed to all of this. And I think it was really in the reactions of my teachers to what I was writing in the creative writing or the English composition components of my learning. And, where I started to understand that there was, power on the page and there was power in the word, spoken or otherwise. So I think that would probably be my earliest memory between the ages of 8 and 10. That there was power there to be tapped.
From what you just read, this idea of the houses gaping open, almost like an open wound because of the devastation of the wind, that image is sticking with me. Another image I read in a line from one of your poems was a frigate bird pinned against the sky. And that our students may not be familiar with frigate birds, but this is something about the identity of being near the ocean, being the person from the island. And I'll put this out there also for Professor Bishop to respond to. Could you talk a little bit about how being from that, well, you're from the island of Trinidad and you transfer to the Virgin Islands. You went to study in England, which is also an island. You also studied here in the United States. So how did these different locations shape your identity? Did you think more about your origin, your home, because of these locations in different ways? And Professor Bishop, I'm coming back to you with that question.
Yeah, I think Professor Bishop mentioned the Odyssey, so I think I think of like the Schooner Flight, that epic poem by Walcott, where basically Shebang traverses from Trinidad all the way up the archipelago, and there's like a little cameo from almost every single island, lock and key on the way. For me, my father is a Virgin Islander, and he has centuries of ancestry that we can trace in the Virgin Islands, because of the very peculiar way in which the plantocracy affected itself here. It was very, very peculiar, and the dynamic of ownership that emancipated peoples enjoyed in the Virgin Islands is something that is very, very different to the rest in the Caribbean by and large. My mother's Trinidadian, and my father grew up in Guyana as well, and his mother's Antiguan. And my maternal grandmother was Grenadian, so it's
No Jamaican in there?
I'm sure
Everywhere
if I
but.
search, I'm sure if I search hard enough, I'll find some. Vincentian too. So it's very much a diasporic and a marine sort of history or family history or family trajectory that we kind of enjoy. That almost everywhere we stop along the Lesser Antilles, there's some connection, whether lived or familial connection. And yeah, I think for me, going to school in Texas was definitely, it was a culture shock in some ways, and then it was also a safe choice in other ways. I think culturally speaking, I couldn't, I had an option of going to the Northeast, where Sister Jacqueline, lives and enjoys, I'm sure, a very charmed existence. But but in Texas, there was something about the fact that people didn't pass you on the street. I'm from a small place where, if you didn't say good morning to an elder, you didn't know it would be a problem. If you didn't, when you enter into the bank, I don't care if it's people doing personal business, you say good morning to the whole bank. And that's still kind of what we expect in the Virgin Islands. And so that kind of element of gentility, I guess, was comforting for me, living in Texas for the few years I was there. but it was a geographical and a sort of a spiritual shock to being landlocked, to being so far away from the ocean. And when you arrive at what they tell you is the ocean, your senses tell you that this is not the ocean. So it was a different kind of experience in Aberystwyth in Wales, where I was actually on the Irish Sea. Aber is a very small place, similar to where I come from, and comforting in those kinds of ways. But of course, it might look away, but it felt a different kind of way. And Sussex, its proximity to Brighton as well. I found myself gravitating after the experience in Texas, as enriching as it was, the places that were, seaborne, that were marine, that were aquatic. So Aberystwyth for the masters and Brighton essentially for the PhD. They were very comforting, in so much that they can be, and reminiscent and sort of closing a sort of triangle between the Atlantic. I think of Gilroy, sort of like kind of completing the triangle, if you will, which I hope to further elaborate on, but by visiting the continent in the coming months.
There's some radically different climates there as you traverse the seas and move about from Wales to Sussex and then back home. But I was going to ask Professor Bishop to also talk a little bit about how because you moved to, was it to New York first? So you were in an urban environment, and then of course the other urban environment, of course, is Paris. So that's a very different culture than, I guess, the rural community that you say your family originates from. So how did you adjust to those changes? How did that affect you as a writer? Did it make you feel more Jamaican?
Yeah, it did actually, because we do not walk around Jamaica saying we're Jamaican, but we do that in the States. We walk around the States saying we're Caribbean and we are Jamaican, right? By the way, I think Richard is living the charmed life, as one who gets to live and work in the Caribbean. And I find that I'm trying to make my way back to the Caribbean. So I'm living now between New York and Miami. The place I've lived all over the world. The place that that I've been trying to put my hands around outside of the places that I actually would say is home. So I would say Jamaica is home, and the United States is home, right? Because that's where I have passports for, right? But being in London and in the UK for 3 years was interesting, because I saw so much of Jamaica there too, in just street names, in just the very red brick buildings that we would have in Jamaica that I used to wonder where the hell this came from, right? And I find the UK a very rich source of information for my own work as an artist. I don't know if I would say the UK is home, but I would say that I see so many elements of home in the UK. The last thing I'll say about this is that you see this quite clearly in now that the Queen has died, and the UK has implemented 10 days of mourning. I will have you know, Jamaica is having 12 days of mourning.
Wow.
So it's more days than the UK, right? Just to let you understand a couple of things. Okay.
Well, I know that there is some feeling in some areas of the Caribbean about the colonialist legacy, and some people are pulling away. So there's some controversy there that we might want to discuss, especially in view of some of your works of art. I would like to look at a few of those images. We're already at 6:25. We're supposed to end our program at 6:30. I don't know if Professor Cassidy had two students that he wanted to include with poems, or
Sumter,
they're here.
Miss Zariah Sumter, one student.
Azariah here. So, I mean, I still have 10,000 questions. How do you want to
Just getting
proceed?
warmed up.
Do you want to include the student at this juncture? Do you want to go forward with more questions? We want to ask for more questions from our audience. What is our host's pleasure?
Dr. Martin, we have two questions from students, and I
Have
think
two?
we
Are they
go
in?
on
In the chat.
book night.
I'm trying to. They're in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh, Savian Book Night. Okay.
So at least let's get to the students, I think.
Yeah, let's ask this question. So Savian Book Night is asking, he's a mechanical engineering major, and his question is, when did you start to take poetry seriously as a writer? I guess that would go to both of our guests. When did you begin to be serious about poetry?
Okay, so I'm going to give up my time to Zaria.
Oh,
Because I know the feeling of coming prepared to read something and not getting to read it. So I'm going to give up my time to Zaria so she can read her poem. Okay.
Okay, Zaria, are you there? Are you ready?
Hi.
there. Hi, Zaria.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm ready.
Can you turn on your camera?
Yeah, I'm trying. Hold on.
Okay.
Um,
Welcome to our Poets Corner.
Hi, everybody. Okay. Oh,
Oops.
Your camera's not on. We can't see your face.
Yeah.
saying I can't start a video because the host has stopped it.
Yeah, you probably have to make her a co-host.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I had.
Okay, so
Let
do
me
you want to
try
take
that.
the question in the meantime, Richard?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I can wait. It's fine.
Okay. So the question was, when did you begin to take poetry seriously? While Zaria's technical things are adjusted.
Is that, am I going to take that? Well, like, Zaria's a co-host. I think we can let her go.
Oh, okay. Sorry, can you turn your camera on now?
Let me try.
There you are.
Hi.
Hi. Good to see you.
Hi, everyone. Okay. Hi, my name is Zaria Sumter. I'm a sophomore at South Carolina State University. Can y'all hear me well? Am I?
Yes.
Yes, loud and clear.
I just wanted to make sure. And this poem is about an African American boy named Emmett Till, and it's just about what happened, his story about what happened, and it's from the mom's point of view about just about what happened to her son. So it goes like, seeing her baby having some fun, she was not worried that day until it had begun. He giggled and ran with his peers, not knowing he would end up with tears of fear. Minding his business and standing around, a white woman who lies came into town. Walking past this little man, she wanted to deceive her family and created a plan. On that cold, lonely, scary night, the little boy was kidnapped and his family could not put up a strong fight. Taken out of his warm bed and out of his house, the two murderous men took the boy to a warehouse. Screaming and pleading for his own life, the evil men knew what they were doing that night. Beaten and bruised until he could not see, all he could do was sit there and plead. Hearing a knife come out of a man's pocket, it took his eyes right out of his socket. They laughed and laughed. That is all the boy could hear. They wanted more blood, so they cut off his brown ear. Crying and crying for his life, he started to realize this was his last night. Forced to strip naked and carry a 75-pound fan, It was his last time his two brown feet would walk on land. All wonder if he would just be in the bed right before he was shot in the head. With that 75-pound fan tied to his neck, all as he drowns in the river all alone. People can be filled with hate to the point it makes you sick. Now the mother must pick up the phone. Do not worry about this sweet angel as he is laying his head. He is still around to this day, even though he is dead. That's it.
Very powerful and absolutely pertinent to our theme of forbidden words and forbidden images. Thank you so much.
Thank
Sorry.
you, y'all.
If you brought us back into focus.
Oh.
Extraordinary. And thank you, Professor Bishop, for being so gracious.
Yes, thank you. That was really sweet. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
So we're at 6:30. Tom, do you want to go to 6:45 for this program? Because obviously I think there's more to be discussed.
If the panelists are willing, yes, please.
So is everyone in accord? Because I would like
We
to
have
look at
such
some of
good
those images.
questions.
Okay.
Yes. So let me actually go back to those images. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to ask first Professor Bishop and then Dr. Georges to talk a little bit about these images. And I'm just going to show that the images from Epiphania that Dr. Georges was referring to the storm. And I just wanted people to see the extraordinary damage, the devastation that Hurricane Irma brought in the Virgin Islands. This is a beached boat. This is the debris on the shoreline. And you mentioned the helicopter, the blades of the helicopter stopped against the sky, I think, and the trees as monuments. This is just a visual rendition of these extraordinary images in language that Dr. Georges was offering us in his poem. But I was going to go back to some of these images from Professor Bishop. Did you want to talk about these, Professor Bishop? Just a little?
Yes, I'll be happy to talk about them. I have to say I hadn't seen those hurricane images before, and they are, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dr. Georges, did you take those pictures yourself?
Some the ones that are less, glossy and professional, I took myself, but then the last two are really should be credited to the Guardian.
Okay.
The Guardian UK, yeah.
So we can talk about devastation in two ways: interior devastation, exterior devastation. And here we have, is that the hibiscus plant that she's holding? And on her head is a tray with fruits and
Yeah.
vegetables. Would you just describe what's there for us, please?
I'm happy to. So this is from the first series of plates that I did called History at the Dinner Table. And I guess what is fascinating to me as an artist is that sometimes you are thinking in your work and you don't realize it, because this is a market woman. And the next series was going to be a market woman, and I didn't know it at the time. I see so many things as I am looking at this. This is a Royal Poinciana flower. And when I look at it, interestingly enough, even though this is an enslaved woman from Brazil who's probably wearing the collar of her enslaver around her neck, that's not a piece of jewelry. That's probably who she owns and who she belongs to. And there's a lot of labor going on. She has to be walking and selling with her child tied to her back. Now, I am going to confess that this is probably one of my favorite images from this first set of images. And I see a lot of things going on. I see Black joy and Black love within this image, horrific as it is about slavery, because she is enslaved. Because the tenderness between mother and child cannot be overlooked. And someone wrote about the image and they said, it's almost as though she's being protected by the plants and flowers and trees of the island. Interestingly enough, this Poinciana plant was used by women, enslaved women, to regulate their fertility on the island. So there are lots of things going on in that image.
And the second image.
Right. So in this image, I am having a discussion with Wedgwood
Oh,
and abolitionists. And, you know, he made that really famous medallion, Am I Not a Man and a Brother?
right.
And white feminists took it up, white abolitionists took it up and did, Am I Not a Woman and a Sister? And this enslaved woman is occupying the position of that medallion. So I'm having a discussion with them, and I'm having a discussion with Wedgwood at the same time. A lot of abolitionist literature was used not to center people of color, actually, but to center whites, you know, white people. And I'm also at the same time thinking about issues having to do with plant collectors who went to places like the Caribbean and they're collecting plants with all sorts of atrocities going on around them at the same time. Like, don't you see what's going on around you? So this is from History at the Dinner Table as well.
I'll go to. Now, this is the one with that very famous image by William Blake.
Based on the work of Stedman, who went to Suriname, and you don't even know what to laugh or what to say, you know. Oh, Joanna, this enslaved woman fell in love with him, and oh, his poor dear Joanna, who was so gallant and brave that she let him go off and leave her with her child in Suriname that he impregnated and he gave to her. You know, I mean, the fantasies that were running through some of these people's heads, right? The plants are the Lignum vitae, which is the national tree of Jamaica. This image caused a lot of discussion because the woman was beaten until flesh was dropping off her. And so in some ways I wanted to give these women back cover them, you know, give them a degree of modesty. The British Art Society and Paul Mellon Foundation London did a whole film that recently came out on the market women, and they talked about some of this work as well. And in it, I talk about wanting to give the women back their femininity, their modesty and whatnot. The film is available online, anybody can see it. And so that's kind of what I was doing here as well.
And would China, like this, be something the market women would hawk? Would they be selling products like this in the streets?
No.
No.
What happened was, and maybe I'd be interested to hear what Richard has to say about this. What happened was, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and my mother kept dishes in the Caribbean. One of the ways that you showed your womanhood was you got your mahogany cabinet and you had these fancy dishes, you know, these wonderful dishes within it. And these dishes came out on Sundays. They came out on special holidays. They were used at funerals, weddings, you know, special occasions, that kind of thing, washed carefully and put back. My grandmother's mahogany cabinet still stands, as does my great grandmother's. And so this happens all across Jamaica. I suspect, based on just the response that I've been getting to the work, that it is a broader phenomena than Jamaica. Just like the market woman in that film, I wanted to cry at the market, at the end, because at the end they were just showing market women from St. Vincent and from Haiti, and she does not just belong to me or to Jamaica. And so what I tried to do was but on these dishes, there were carriages and monarchy and all, and so I tried to use the dishes to show what gave rise to this monarchy and, and these carriages and this luxury, which was of course sugar and slavery. So that's how I ended up doing these dishes. I'd be curious to hear what Richard has to say if these dishes are more widespread than Jamaica.
Well, I can say the market woman is certainly in South Carolina, in Charleston. So a manifestation is here because, well, South Carolina is the northernmost point of the Caribbean in any case, actually.
Well, my next set of dishes is on South Carolina. I need to actually talk to you about that.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good.
So I was just going to, and this is the last one. This was.
No, but I'd really like to hear what Richard has to say, though.
I definitely concur. I've been in many a sitting room, and sitting rooms where people don't really sit, and definitely the image of the mahogany, cabinet, and having full of china and crystal that nobody really uses. The good china, the good crystal that never actually comes out, kind of just sits. I've broken many a piece.
You did?
in my childhood.
You did, and you're still alive, Richard?
Oh dear.
So yeah, very, very, very familiar, and as well as the like I said, many aunties and grannies and stuff with very proud collections.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's true also in South Carolina, that if you, for the special guests, you bring out the special china, you bring out you'd have the mahogany cabinet, and then the china usually given at the wedding would be set aside and taken care of very, carefully, and only brought on the special occasions. There are a couple more questions as we approach 6:45. So Nancy sent a question for Richard. She said, there's a haunting unknowing in your poetry which takes us into the mystery of things. Is this philosophical stance intentional in your work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the premise of Epiphania was exactly that, and the collection prior to it, Giant, had a very political, philosophical stance where the whole idea was to elevate mundanity and little spaces and little moments and forgotten histories, sort of like to vault them, to magnify, to examine, and to find, there's definitely a sort of spirituality or religiosity that I find embedded in the natural world that I often find myself pulled towards and compelled to describe and to write about. So yes.
And I think this will have to be the last question. It's from Professor Carrie Perkins. She said, this is for Professor Bishop. You mentioned green-haired women in your poetry. Is there a symbolism and or meaning behind that? This is for the River Mama image.
I just want to recognize that on the page, I see Celia Sorhaindo. I'm probably not saying that right, a well-known Caribbean poet as well. So welcome, Celia. I wish someone would write about that. I don't have an answer for it, except that she turns up over and over, and her hair is always green, and sometimes it's locked. She is my muse. I do not know why her hair is green. Maybe from the moss maybe from the river, maybe from all of those things. But I do know that is how she shows up to me.
So she's a mermaid or siren, because
McDonald Dixon is also in
Yeah.
attendance. Yeah.
hello. So the siren was a sort of hostile figure, and the river mama is a kind of siren. She lures the men to their death, doesn't she?
Well, she has a different story to tell in my new collection.
Okay. It looks like Dr. McClutchy has a question.
Yeah, I was thinking about Professor Bishop. I was thinking about that image of that woman, given the controversy about this new Ariel, right?
Right.
Because
The brown Ariel. Yeah.
how can you have a black mermaid, right? And I read somewhere where someone said, posted on social media, well, after you threw all those Africans into the water, what do you think the mermaid is?
Why are you surprised?
Yeah, but to both of you, this was just a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.
Okay. Can I just make one request? McDonald Dixon, well-known poet, well-known writer from the Caribbean, has his hand up. If we could
yes.
just, and I know Richard says he has to go, and I'm going to have to go after McDonald Dixon.
Yeah, I can't see all the hands. Iana
well,
Johnson has a hand up, and McDonald Dixon, which can you unmute, McDonald? Or did you put your question? There.
Yes.
Hello, welcome.
Yes, I am particularly interested in the mermaid, the river mermaid in the poems. And I'll tell you why. In St. Lucia, our equivalence to that would be what is called the La Jablesse, which is the woman with the cloven foot. But it seems that the actions of the mermaid in Jamaican folklore, she seems benign or very nice, but our image is not benign. She is capable of some of the worst atrocities you can find, particularly against children. And it features a lot at our wakes and so on. So there is a common thread running through all the islands. And the other thing was the mention of the plates and the crystals and so on. What I can remember growing up in my grandmother's house was goblets having images of the coronations from Edward VII. And I always remembered royalty by looking at those goblets. So I could tell you that it was Edward VII, George V, then George VI, of course, minus Edward VIII. And I remember those distinctly. So thank you very much for bringing up those memories. And of course,
thank you, McDonald.
Yes, and of course, the other poet, I think there's some wonderful imagery in your work. It reminds me a lot of sometimes of the poems of Derek Walcott, but particularly his latter phase just before White Egrets. Beautiful imagery. Thank you very much. I think I really enjoyed this evening.
Now, I think there was one more question from a student. Iana Johnson, are you able to come on?
Yes, sir. Hi, how's everyone doing?
Hi, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. It was actually an accident that I raised my hand. I'm sorry.
Oh, it was an accidental. I'm
Yes.
sorry. Okay.
Thank
I
you.
thought it was intentional. My mistake.
You're fine.
Well, we've gone about 20 minutes over, so I'm going to conclude the this part of the program, I think. Let's see if I can. So I'm going to go back and finish up the PowerPoint and end our program. So I'd like to thank our distinguished guests, Professor Jacqueline Bishop, or should I say Jacqueline, because of all that study in France and Morocco and Francophone countries, And of course, Richard Georges, Dr. Georges also has a French pronunciation because Georges is usually how that would be Richard Georges. So this is a really African diasporic event. I wish I had gotten to talk to you about the Rivers of Babylon pieces. We just don't have enough time really to discuss these extraordinary images that you brought with you, both of you, and your beautiful work. But this has been a program that was organized by Dr. Thomas Cassidy as a professor of English in the Department of English and Communications. Thank you, Dr. Cassidy. And our cohort in this is Dr. Alison McCletchie, who is assistant professor of sociology and a proud native of Trinidad and Tobago, who is expatriated to here. And they constitute our production team along with myself. And again, the thanks to the faculty, staff, students, and the chair of the Department of English and Communications at South Carolina State University. A thank you to the South Carolina Humanities who funded our program very generously for a second or third season at this point, and the various departments. And the program, like I said before at the beginning, was originated from our collaboration as a group, the Dr. Cassidy, Dr. McCletchie, myself, through the on-campus museum, which, like I said, has an extensive collection of African and African-American art. And we thought that it would be of interest to have a discursive space for the artistic productions of the African diaspora. And thank you both so much for your international, the international candor, this cachet you brought to the program. And so with that, I'm Frank Martin, a member of the Association Internationale des Critiques d'Art, and visiting associate professor in art history at South Carolina State. This concludes the recorded portion of our program, and I'd like to thank all of our guests for attending.
And one final thing before I stop the recording. Some of you saw that Professor McCletchie put in the chat details about a talk she's giving. Registration is still open. Registration closes on the 20th. And I'm having a hard time.
I'm seeing it. It's the social change and gender-based violence representations in Caribbean literature and performance culture. It's the 22nd through the 23rd of September. It's in the chat, and the registration link is there. It's, the registration closes on Tuesday, the 20th of September. Dr. McCletchie, did you want to say anything else about that?
I would just invite folks to come. I think one of the wonderful things about Caribbean scholarship is that we do not have these tight bounded spaces. You know, I think we understand that the various disciplines talk to each other as we witness here tonight. And so I want to encourage everyone to come, because some of the best scholars of the Caribbean will be there. You know, I don't count myself among them. I just show up to try and figure out how they do what they do, but please attend if you can.
Okay, so the registration link is there. We have to say good evening to Dr. Richard Georges. Thank you so much for your wonderful contribution, and we hope to see you again in a future program. And
thank you for having me.
And lastly, let me encourage people to register for our next Words Across the Water program, which will be October 6th. I dropped the PDF in the chat file. The speakers on that occasion will be Cindy Marshall from the Barbados and Jillian Hainsworth from Buffalo, New York. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop the recording. Stop recording.